Hey guys, MrPokke here, back with another video, and on today's episode of Early Access Reviews, we are going to be taking a look at a massive brand new version 2.0 DPS, Yixuan, coming into Zenless Zone 0, right? For Yixuan, she's going to be one of the most complex units to date with 5 different EX skills, 2 different ultimates, and 4 unique dodge animations. So she also brings in the latest Auric Ink, similar to Miyabi's Frost, as well as a brand new Rapture class which focuses on sheer damage that has a built-in 100% defense ignore. So there's honestly a lot of things to unpack with her kit, and I'll try to break down as much as I could understand with my pre-limited time spent on Yixuan as of this current point of time. So expect there to be even more complex depth rotations, hidden combinations when players discover her full potential, right? So I'll be going through her kit, generally how she's playing, her W engines, Mindscape, team comms, etc. So without further ado, let's get into today's content. So jumping straight into the character kit, going into Yixuan's top left bar, her entire gimmick is essentially gaining an incredibly fast energy, or more specifically known as adrenaline, because it has a lot of auto refund options from a lot of different ways, such as perfect dodging, channeling basic 7 seconds up to 21, squad member ultimates for 2 over 10 seconds, perfect assist for 5, and perfect EX parries for 10 adrenaline, right? And for every single one of these adrenaline consumed, she will gain 0.67 technique points, which is going to be the lower bar with a little yin yang tai chi symbol at the side, right? And once this technique points is gonna be all the way up to the maximum 120, she can then use a free ultimate. So the general vibes that I'm gonna be getting with this entire kit is that she wants a daze damage dealer to help put the enemy into daze as soon as possible, while at the same time making use of quick swaps to expand her adrenaline in order to build up the maximum technique points and trigger a 2 ultimate burst damage within that daze formation. So from a DPS perspective, she is going to be playing quite similarly to a daze DPS, but she still has very good field uptime because of all of her built-in mechanics and parries, and she's also going to be our first ever pseudo HP scaling DPS because she directly converts HP into sheer force, and sheer force is going to be one where she's going to be dealing tremendous damage because of the Rupture class itself. And this entire mechanic, it completely ignores defense as well as on top of pen effects, since sheer damage is considered as 100% defense ignore. So this means that for our team building options, it would be quite different from previous supports such as Rina, Lucy, Nicole, and there's a very good possibility that more dedicated supports for Yixuan will be introduced in the future, right? So just jumping into a couple of key notes that I've been noticing when playing her in my time, which is that there are a lot of different ways to weave in her combination and attacks with quick swaps. So if you take a look at this example here, you can actually use Ashra Yao's as additional assist to swap Yixuan out to another unit at her 4th basic attack, allowing Yixuan to continuously channel the longer attack animation while your other unit continuously deals toughness bar damage, such as for example in this case Trigger, and towards the end of this combination you can then swap back into Yixuan, right? The general gist is there are definitely a lot of ways where players can make use of these functions to deal as much damage as possible while still dealing decent toughness bar damage by making use of a secondary toughness bar slot too. So that would most likely be a playstyle which does indicate to me that her skill ceiling for a player to use her to the maximum efficiency, in my opinion, is going to be one of the higher units compared to a lot of our other Zenless Zone Zeros, so please just take that into consideration. And then for her burst damage, it will mainly come from the giant channeling ball thingy into the ultimate combination, which can deal tremendous sheer plus raw damage within the enemy day state when you pair with your allies, right? So for me, I'll try to hold my ultimate until the day state is achieved quickly in order to deal the highest burst damage within a short window of time. And in a similar vein, she also feels like a damage DPS in terms of this burst rotation, but like I mentioned just now, she has incredible field uptime because it feels very smooth to use her on field by constantly spamming the EX specials or the perfect parries, which technically helps you to build up more adrenaline, which means you can use the adrenaline during the perfect parries to build up your technique points up to 120, right? So in my opinion, the moment you reach your technique points up to 120, it should be around the same time when the enemy is going to be getting into the day stage, around the same ballpark. So that's when you want to basically divert more of your attention outside from Yixuan and more back into your breaker, so the enemy reaches the break and then you can basically slam in your double ultimate within the entire stage, right? You do not want to spam your basics with Yixuan, so when the enemy is not attacking or stationary, it means that when you're going to be spamming your EX skill, you are going to be expending quite a bit of energy, but you can't build back up enough energy, because even though you can chain an EX skill into another EX skill, the way you gain energy is most of the time reactionary. So you want an enemy to actually attack you, or you want to be dodging yourself in order to build it back up. So this means that swapping to another unit, for example in this case, for a day's build up using additional units such as Trigger, Koleda, or even Qingyi, or just going for the raw damage will be preferred, right? So although she has a lot of dodges built in, most scenarios I found myself not really using the perfect dodge that much because her ES skill is almost going to be permanently up if you're going to be building big or adrenaline, which is going to be very fast on top of all the mechanics we explained earlier. So I did find myself using this very often, which also helps you directly contribute into building your technique points for that free ultimate, right? And speaking about this whole ES skill in the parry system, her ES can also be used to press and hold in case your timing is going to be off for up to 2 seconds, and it can use to connect back into a follow-up attack after every single parry, right? So just get a little bit of note now. And one last thing is that regarding the channeling ball energy, which is the final attack of the base attack, the area grouping is actually not too small, but it definitely needs proper positioning, otherwise you're definitely going to be missing the targets. So it does very decent damage against mobs, so you can actually use this to quick assist into another stunner and let your stunner daze the enemy mob, and then you swap back into Yixuan, and that should pretty much get rid of most, if not every single one of the mobs in the very first wave before you enter into the boss, right? So that's pretty much the couple of the keynotes that I've been noticing from my initial time playing her. Like I mentioned, I think this character has a lot of depth left to be discovered, so feel free to take a look in the future videos where people can explore her to the maximum capabilities, right? So at this one, I just want to add a quick little segment about the potential discussion between Yixuan versus Miyabi, because in my opinion, both Yixuan and Miyabi, they are sort of like very popular banners that Xenon Zone Zero, they are definitely going to be pushing out more to the general public. You can see from Miyabi in version 1.4, they really went all of the advertising. Same thing for Yixuan, which is going to be Xenon Zone Zero's 2.0 anniversary patch, right? So between these two DPS, how would you compare between them? I would say from the limited time that I've been playing for both Miyabi as well as Yixuan, in both sides of the shield defense, Miyabi, it might be because of the fact that I'm just a little bit more comfortable with Miyabi, and Yixuan as a kid, she does have, in my opinion, a higher skill ceiling than Miyabi. After players get a little bit more used to Yixuan, I think there might be a possibility that you can get used to the kid, because from my time so far, Miyabi does feel better overall in terms of playing, especially because of the quality of life that is gonna be, you know, the enhanced basic 3 level attack, which basically one shot with a very large radius for almost all of the mobs, and she has a lot of iframes built in, and with the amount of anomaly supports we've been getting, such as from Yanagi, such as from Vivian, you know, Miyabi, I feel that at this point she does feel very strong, right? Whereas for Yixuan, I think that she needs more room to grow, not just from like a team building perspective, because like I mentioned, she doesn't really have, in my opinion, her best in slot team comp for now, because she doesn't scale that well with attack scaling support or defense or pen ignore supports, right? And on top of that, players probably need a little bit more time to get used to the overall way she plays, because she definitely feels a very unique unit that has never really been seen before, like in any of the other DPS classes in Xenon Zone Zero, right? You basically want to play her sort of like a burst DPS, but not really like a burst DPS. You want to play her sort of like a parry counter unit, but not too much as well, because you basically want to weave in the uptime between squeezing in, building up your adrenaline to build up your technique points, and at the same time dealing more toughness bar, or rather daze damage accumulated for the enemy, because Yixuan herself does not do that much daze just by herself, right? She definitely needs somebody to help her break the enemy as fast as possible, and only during that window of opportunity, if players can get down this rotation, either by getting familiar with the quick swapping, getting familiar with the uptime, downtime of the skills, then at this point is when I believe that Yixuan's potential can truly rise up. And on top of that, if you're gonna be getting more synergistic team comps, such as for example Jufufu in the future, or maybe another unit that can potentially replace your Asha Yao, which in my opinion, the Panda with Jufufu is probably gonna be a best in slot, then I think at this point is where Yixuan is gonna be a lot more comparable and a lot more welcoming, especially for players expecting a performance to be soaring for a version 2 DPS unit, right? So just keep in mind, I would spend quite a bit of time understanding her mechanics and learning how rotation feels before committing into, you know, going all in for Yixuan, right? So that's pretty much it. Now jumping into the W engine option, her signature W engine Qingming Birdcage is gonna be pretty much a best in slot, and it is by a pretty large margin, likely close to 30% improvement compared to the battle pass as well as the free event option, right? So you can take a look over here, we do have a 30% HP buff with a 20% crit rate and up to 2 stacks of the Qingming companion, which means you're gonna be stacking up to a 16% ether damage, as well as increased ultimate, EX special, sheer damage for your ether by 10%, which means going up to 20%, right? So even though the free event option is not too bad, but in the current landscape with what we have right now, this W engine just straight up performs better in a lot of different scenarios, and because this is also the only 5-star option available, which means that you're gonna be able to get access to the highest health pool for your raw stats, right? But keep in mind, it should be noted that players shouldn't feel pressured to get this signature weapon, even though this is gonna be very good, because Rupture as a whole is considered a brand new class. So it is very likely that more W engines will be released in the future. If you want to use the event like code until a later time, you can also be considering this as well, especially because if you want to talk about Yixuan's teammates, because if you're going to be playing her efficiently, you're either going for the vertical investment on the W engine or you're going for the vertical investment for her teammate options, namely her support as well as the Dazer, right? We do stand to gain quite a lot of decent upgrades in the teammate department as well, because she has a lot of brand new mechanics that does not synergize that well with the current supports that we have. Namely, she is not really an attack scaling DPS, and she doesn't really give a damn about your defense ignore or your pen ignore, right? So that's pretty much gonna be it. And jumping into the build for Yixuan, very straightforward, basically just use the brand new 4-piece we're gonna be getting access to, 2-piece 10% HP, and when you're using your EX special chain attack ultimate, crit rate increased by up to 3 times, which is gonna be a free 12% crit rate, and increased sheer damage by 10%. So pretty much best is slot, no other reason to use anything else. For the 2-piece, you can go for 2-piece crit damage, crit rate, or ether damage. They're all gonna be very viable. Keep in mind, do not use pen anymore because she's not gonna be scaling off with that, right? Then for your main stats for a slot 4, it's gonna be either crit damage or crit rate. Then for slot 5, it's gonna be ether damage or HP, and then for slot 6, it's gonna be HP or potentially anomaly mastery 6, right? For your substats, very standard crit ratio over HP percentage, and keep in mind, all of the pen is not gonna be that useful for her. I mentioned just now for the anomaly slot 6, you could consider anomaly mastery 6 to trigger the ether corruption a little bit more frequently, but sometimes it leads to a similar situation of back to the Miyabi debate, where do people use the attack percentage slot 6, or do we use the anomaly mastery slot 6 for faster frostbite, right? So for that, you can take a look and see how this plays, because I feel that it's gonna be more dependent on the enemy than a standard formula going forward. But I think HP, you can't really go wrong with that. And then jumping into a Mindscape's crit rate increased by 10%, and it immediately gains 120 technique points, which means you can immediately cast off the very first ultimate, triggering once every 180 seconds. And when any squad member lands a hit on enemy, immediately summons an extra lightning strike, 50% of sheer force, and restoring 5 additional adrenaline once every 6 seconds. So this free ultimate immediately at the start of battle, you can instantly help yourself chain to the second ultimate during the days to hit it even faster, and the additional adrenaline stacking as well as the 50% multiplier, it just basically helps your ultimate to improve a little bit more uptime, right? That being said, I would say that even though you can trigger this ultimate ASAP, because the enemy is not going to be in the day state, you're probably not going to be dealing as crazy of a damage, but I think it's going to be very helpful when it comes to clearing the mobs. If you're not going to be clearing against the mobs and it's just against a boss on elite, then this very first ultimate wouldn't be doing too much, because you do want to land the stun on the enemy first and then cast off a double ultimate regardless of the case, because either you cast your ultimate 1 into ultimate 2 or ultimate 2 into ultimate 1, there's not going to be too much of a difference. So in my opinion, the M1 is not going to be that crazy unless you're caring about declaring the mobs, right? But M2 is going to be a different topic, and because I believe that this is a very powerful M2. So to summarize everything you guys see over here, you can just read it for yourself. In my opinion, this is pretty much the best DPS M2 today, and is very comparable to M2 Miyabi, potentially even better than M2 Miyabi because of the synergy with the M1, right? So very similar to Miyabi, it drastically improves Yixuan's rotations while giving her the 50% ether rest pen, while extending the stun duration, which means you can squeeze in even more damage combinations, or potentially maybe even like 3 ultimates for like some future team comps. And after every single EX, when you use an ultimate, you also tie yourself together with the M1, which gives you the additional free ultimate at the start of battle, on top of the additional 5 adrenaline every 6 seconds, which means that you're going to be getting this 1200% multiplier of sheer force, which also 100% has a defense ignore. It is just going to be extremely from the damage numbers perspective, as well as overall rotation. So I do believe that this M2 is very strong. Right, then jumping to the M4, don't really have too much to talk about. More damage, big booms. Yeah, but that's pretty much it. And then finally, for the M6, combining M6 with M1 and M2, in my opinion, this places Yixuan as likely one of, if not the strongest M6 DPS. I'm not going to be too sure if it's going to be comparable to M6 Miyabi, because they both have extremely powerful kits. And then in conclusion, in my opinion, I believe the W engine is going to be more important than the M1. And then if you do want to go for the M1, I would say that you might just go all the way for the M2. Otherwise, sticking at M0 S1 is going to be, in my opinion, the best bang for buck for most players, right? So that's pretty much going to be it. And now jumping into the final segment, which is going to be the team comms. From the live stream, in my opinion, the best in slot team comm right now is most likely going to be the Sui-Bian Temple roster with Jufufu and Panda for the synergy with Sheer Force, Sustain, as well as Yixuan being a HP or rather a pseudo HP scaling DPS, right? And until her arrival, Ashra Yao is going to be the de facto best replacement, even though she really doesn't benefit that much from the attack. But the combo units with stun units such as Trigger, Qing, or Koleda after the rework could see a very fast days and allows Yixuan's burst damage to be a little bit faster in terms of tempo, right? Without Ashra Yao, Caesar King is also a decent buffer because the hit resist shield is going to help you a little bit more quality of life, especially for players that are not very comfortable with using Yixuan's perfect built-in EX parries. Although just like Ashra Yao, her attack buff is not going to be too helpful for her. Other than this, all the other alternatives such as your Lucy, your Nicole, your Rina, they either only buff attack or they buff like, you know, defense ignore or like pen resist, and all these things are just not going to be that synergistic with Yixuan. So just keep that in mind. You could most likely going to be running the Panda in this point because Panda does have your built-in sheer force, right? And then for your stun slot, it's going to be quite a bit flexible. For now, Trigger, Qing-Yi, or even the rework Koleda, they can all work. Or maybe in the future, we're going to be getting even more synergistic stun units to pair with Yixuan. Then that slot could be discussed when the time comes. But for now, in my opinion, best in slot is going to be Yixuan plus a Panda, which also happens to be a banner. And then we're going to see how Jufufu's kit is going to be functioning in the next update. With that, we have come to the end of Yixuan's early access review. I am very glad that I do still have the opportunity to play in the Zen Zone Zero creator experience server, because as you guys have known by now, you know, my basic gameplay around Zen Zone Zero is basically coming around here and there and explore the story options and play the units as I see fit, because I basically enjoy playing the units without really going all into the meta and calculations, best and slot rotation, everything, right? I would highly recommend a large variety of different other Zen Zone Zero content creators if you guys are going to be looking for a much more in-depth meta, like number crouching, guide access for Yixuan. So for this, it's just going to be a very simplified from a basically a very casual perspective of how she feels like when I actually got my hands on her for like the past couple of hours in the early access server, right? So that is pretty much going to be it. Let me know in the comments below if you're going to be pulling for her. Word of the day is going to be bounce. Yep. I don't know. She is pretty bouncy, right? Join Twitch, join YouTube, join Discord, join Twitter, join Twitter. All the best. I gotcha pools. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.